everybody, and welcome to ConTinual, the con that never ends. We're so glad you're here. We are talking tonight with the ever fabulous Nicole Kurtz. So welcome, and let's talk about writing and books and all the great stuff you've created. So tell us how you got started in this crazy business. When did you first start writing?
Oh my gosh. So I started writing when I was really little. And I think a lot of people have a similar story. I had a very active imagination. So when my favorite cartoon had ended or my favorite family show had ended, I would go upstairs, and if I had to go to bed, I would continue the story in my imagination until I fell asleep. And so I was kind of doing fan fiction before I could actually write. My mom is a big writer. She's a big journaler. And so I would many times just sit with her, and she's got magazines all over her bed, and she's reading, and I would just sit with my paper and write the stories that my mom is writing. So my mom tends to chronicle our family history and events. And so I just was writing with her. So I've been writing like my whole life. But when I really fell into love with creative writing was in high school. Because I had been invited by my English teacher to submit an essay for an area district contest.
Oh, cool.
For high school students. And so I did, and I won. So that was pretty awesome. Got my picture in the paper, got paid $100, which in 1990 was big money for a 16-year-old. And so it was I was like, wait, someone would pay me for my words, me. Like I knew they would pay Stephen King, and I knew they would pay like Robin Cook, but Nicole, really? And so that was kind of one of the things that hooked me. So when I went to college a couple years later, I didn't start out majoring in English. I majored in computer science because that's what I loved, computers. But I minored in English because I still really loved English. And by like second semester freshman year, I had like C's and D's in the computer science classes, and I had like straight A's in the English class. I'm like, okay. So I switched them. And then so I became an English major, but an English writing major. And so I did lots of writing, and I still enjoy, my degree is in rhetoric. And I still love, logical, well-structured arguments and essay writing. But I do love fiction a great deal as well. So
that's the best. That's the best. Rhetoric.
Yeah. That's I actually taught it a few years at the University of New Mexico at the Gallup branch.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a big fan and took courses at Red Loaf on rhetoric as well. So
oh my gosh. But I imagine that makes you a superb judge of a superb analyst of not only your own work when you can step back from it, but of other people's work, because you have that logical sort of, when you switch over to that logical brain from the creative brain, I imagine that serves you really well in terms of self-editing and then editing.
Yes.
Does it or not?
It can. And so sometimes I'm like, I know this doesn't make any sense, so I'm gonna use it anyway, just because I like the way that line flows. And my husband's like, so sometimes it's an internal debate. Right. I know this doesn't make any sense, but I want to keep it anyway. So I have a hard time killing my darlings sometimes. But it has served me well in divorces. I have two. So I've been pretty logical in getting out of those bad situations. But it also is a curse, right? Because of all the arguments or people's, here's my theory online. I'm just like, there's 18 logical fallacies in that whole thing. So
yeah. And I'm going to step back. It's so hard not to get on that bandwagon and
to turn it off, right? I'm like,
yeah,
your argument has many flaws. I'm going to go eat ice cream, because
you bet you're eating a lot of ice cream.
I just had to train myself not to engage, because I'm like, this doesn't equal that. That's a logical fallacy. Just no, that's a bandwagon. That's a straw man thing. So I'm like having all these. I'm like, I can't spend my time on this. So then I go off and I play in the Kingdom of Avis, or I go visit Sybil's the district and try to do something fun, right?
Because it takes your mind off the people over there doing that terrible thing.
Social media has made that worse because everyone thinks they're an expert arguing. I'm just like, no. There's so not to mention that half of what you're saying is not factual. It's also filled with fallacies and incorrect logic. I'm just gonna go.
I can't stay here any longer.
Over here and write my mystery.
So you progressed from that great high school and into college and everything. When did you start writing with the intent to share it with the world?
So I did the thing where you like submit your short stories to all of these contests. I did that in like 97, and I got my first book contract in 98.
Ooh,
and it was an electronic publisher. So and it was for Brown Candidate, which is a story that's very much like A Handmaid's Tale. And don't go buy it, and please don't read it because it's awful. It should have never been put into print. Like, it's really awful. As all first books tend to be, it's not very good. So the ebook publisher was around possibly 30 seconds, and then they were gone.
Yeah.
And so I had to find another publisher, and the second publisher I found was Crystal Dreams Publishing, which was out of Wisconsin at the time. And they went on to publish Brown Candidate, The Soul Cages originally, a follow-up novella to The Soul Cages, so a bunch of other things. So that was kind of my kickstart into publishing, which was very much centered on electronic publishers, small price publishers.
Right.
Though I was still with my big volume of Writer's Digest, still submitting, trying to get an agent, and still. Look, people, these are the days. These are the ancient times of trying to get.
These are the times when you queried with the first 5
self-addressed stamped envelope.
Yes. Put a self-addressed and 5 pages in hopes that you had enough hook in 5 pages to get them to ask for 50 pages.
Yes.
And you
you printed on your Corona, right? You typed on your
please tear off the dot matrix print edges before you send this in. And where you opened the champagnes, if they even responded, even if it was negative, you were like, woohoo!
The post person was your friend because they were bringing you. Y'all want to talk about you can't wait. The waiting for a response was horrendous. You literally just went and did something else and forgot that you submitted to them because
you kind of had to, because so many of them, and nobody paid any attention to this, but so many of them said you cannot multiple query.
Nope.
So if you're querying to us, please don't query to anybody else. Well, then they take 3 months to get back to you, and you're like, not doing that.
Maybe, because it could have got lost in the mail.
Right.
Which is always
exactly.
So I did that and actually I stayed in small press publishing and really enjoyed it because it was faster.
Right.
Until I got I landed with Parker Publishing. And at the time, Parker Publishing was a mid-sized press. They had LA Banks, and they had a really kind of big cachet of authors, Black authors who were writing romance for them, and speculative romance and regular contemporary romance. But they were interested in their editor, the acquisition editor, was actually a big fan of science fiction and fantasy. Her name was Kimberlyn, and she really wanted to start a sci-fi line. And so she read Silence, which is the first Sybil Lewis book, and wrote me, was like, I want this series.
You gotta love that. When somebody resonates with the story
she called me, which I was floored, because I was like, she actually called me on the phone, which was amazing. Like, this is a day, right? And so this is like 2000-ish, 2001-ish. It was very early, right after the millennium. And so I got an advance. I got a 2000 book run. I got a 3-book deal. I was like, yes, I'm on my way. And then the following year, the bottom fell out of paperback publishing. So no one bought. that book.
Yeah.
And they really had a difficult time marketing it because they hadn't done sci-fi before.
Right. And they had been known as a romance press. Yeah.
It was really difficult to land. And so the cover was very much, it was kind of futuristic, but it was pink and black.
That's a little bit of a problem.
So I had book signings at Walden Books and book signings at places, and I had a decent time like getting out there. But what I hoped was a shot up out of self-publishing and on to bigger things, not greater things, but bigger things didn't happen. And so they did publish the next 2 books in the series. They did fulfill my contract. They did pay me. They didn't do another print run because, again, by that time, ebooks were huge. And so they did do, they went on to print on demand. They did do paper. They did do ebooks. So when my contract with them was up, and I want to say maybe 5 years after that, I got all my rights back, and then I republished them at Mocha.
Yes, and the covers are much more appropriate.
And Tanya did a great job of.
Yeah. I was looking at all the different things on Amazon, and I was like, wow, that's a cool cover. I like that one. And Tanya does beautiful covers.
She does, and it was brilliant, and it fit the cyberpunk futuristic noir that is Sybil Lewis. That whole series, it was great. Yeah,
and people sometimes discount, I think, how much a cover can sell a book. Because especially in the days of the Zon and ebooks and things, because even in a thumbnail, if it catches your eye, people go, oh, well, what's that about? And it's astonishing how much the cover can kill a book too.
Yes. So very true. Because I've redone covers multiple times for a few books, just trying to get the right tone and what the genre requires for that. And it's a little difficult for me because my genres are mixed. They're all mashups, right? They're all mystery plus something speculative. And so that's a little harder to navigate than your typical sci-fi or fantasy or horror title.
Right. Well, what led you in that direction? Because you started out with a romance publisher and went to the, much more the speculative fiction, but it, as you said, has a mystery to it. So those of us who are sort of genre benders, we do have a harder time. What led you more to those genres and adding speculative fiction into mystery, or having a speculative fiction mystery, rather than trying the more traditional routes?
So I love mysteries, and I think you and I've talked about this before. I'm a huge mystery reader, right? So Sue Grafton and Robert B. Parker, those are my people. Lawrence Sanders, those are my people. Love mysteries. But I'm also a big horror and science fiction and fantasy fan as well. And so the stories that I enjoy are the ones that tend to have a mixture of both those things, like immensely. Sometimes the real world mysteries, like Sue Grafton, brilliant writer, great character. But sometimes I'm like, this would be great if the car would just levitate. I wanted a little bit more speculative in my mysteries. So I was like,
wonder what would happen if.
Yes. So what I wanted,
met a ghost yet?
Right. So the stories that I tend to love, like Blade Runner and Richard K. Morgan's Altered Carbon, and those stories, even my favorite story series is The Dark Tower. Well, Roland's quest is a mystery. You don't know what he's going to run into next. Who is the man?
I hadn't thought about it like that.
The biggest question is in book 1. The man in black crossed the desert and the gunslinger followed. Well, who the hell is the man in black? That's like the beginning.
And why are we following him?
Right? And so
I had not thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Yes. It's a quest, much like Lord of the Rings. But there are huge questions as to how does Roland know all these things ahead of time? Who are the people in this world? Why are they drawing these people? It's just a fantastic adventure. So the stories that I tend to like and love are the ones that mix that up. And so, of course, that's what I tend to write that I like.
Well, you've got to love the story, because as someone said the other day, I saw on one of the social media things, you better love the story you're writing, because you're going to read it till you're sick of it. So you better enjoy writing it.
Yes.
So what is your writing process? I mean, there are some people who like to get up at 4 a.m. and write for 2 hours when the house is quiet. Some people stay up till 2 a.m. and write when the house is quiet. Some people go to a coffee house where it's banging and noisy and love to write there. What's your process?
Oh my gosh. So of course, over the last 20 years, it's been different. It changes.
Yes.
But right now, I don't do anything early. Like I just am, that's not how my body works. So I am usually up and I usually write to true crime shows. So they're on. I may not be watching them, and they're not getting my full attention, but they're just on in the background.
Yeah.
So I tend to like write till late, like 2 or 3 in the morning. Now that I'm working full time, I don't do that quite as much.
Yeah.
So I end up writing like during lunch, or I'm writing, a little earlier in the evening just because I
Yeah.
gotta
Well,
get up
you
and
got to
go to
get up
work the next day. But on
yeah.
the weekends though, I do tend to write into the morning.
And
That's kind of my process.
do you have any of those quirky things that you do to get yourself in the right brain space for it?
I shut the door and kick my dogs out. I mean,
simple steps, but effective.
so one of the things I do, especially if I haven't touched it in a while, I'll go back and read it from the beginning, just so I can sink in, or I'll go back and read the previous chapter so I can sink into the world and try to rediscover the thread, right? If it's brand new, one of the things I try to do now that I didn't used to do when I was when I was a wee writer, I try to plan out what could happen in each. I try to actually like plot. Before I was just a major pantser, which I still am when it comes to Sybil, because when Sybil discovers who the bad person is, or discovers a clue, Sybil discovers it. Yes. I don't know it's coming. And people are like, that's really weird because you're the one writing her. Okay, yeah, I'm writing her, but Sybil's actually telling the story. It's her story. And so I just listen to what she tells me and I write it down. And if I get it wrong, she lets me know. Because she's the next morning, I'm like, oh, my hand hurts. Oh yeah, that's a bad scene. Let me go ahead and read. Thanks, Sybil.
Appreciate that. Now, how many books are in the series with Sybil?
3. 3, and then there's a short story collection called Collected. So all the titles are action words: silenced, cozened, which means to be deceitful, replicated, and then collected. And collected, of course, it has 5 novellas in it, 5 short story novella length stories that happen. Some of them are before Sybil meets Jane, and some of them are after she's met Jane. So
cool. So what set you off into Sybil's world? Because you said you're a pantser most of the time, and she came to you and she directs the story.
She directs.
But you also write books other ways.
I do. And so like Sybil's the first person. And she was the first like mystery that I wrote. And I like I said, I liked Altered Carbon. I also like Blade Runner, but I also love Robert B. Parker's Spencer series, which in Hawk. Yeah. And so I was like, what would that be like if they were women in the future, right? So they have I've pitched it as a Blade Runner with a Black female lead, but a lot of the parts of Sybil's world is her relationship with Jane, which is her protege. And if you read Jane, she reads a lot like Hawk. She's very down to earth, very gritty. And like I think if you go to Sybil's site, her comment about Jane's comment about Sybil is, "Oh, she'd be dead if it wasn't for me." Like that's their relationship, right? Yeah. She's constantly like, I'm the one who keeps her safe, and Sybil's like, I'm the mentor, and she's like, whatever. And so they have a very Spencer and Hawk type relationship. Which I absolutely adore. And so I think that was a big influence on both Sybil and Jane in terms of like characters. Right. But the setting is straight out of Blade Runner, right? It's straight cyberpunk. It's straight futuristic noir. It's she's like Shaft. She goes in and handles things in her neighborhood for people who need it or people who don't feel comfortable going to the regulators, aka the police. So
right. Yeah. So then, having had Sybil and Jane be your sort of mainstay, why did you start plotting? Why did you start outlining stories when you're more of a pantser?
So the stories that I outline the most are Kill Three Birds, right? And the whole Kingdom of Ava series, which is not science fiction, it's mystery fantasy. I wanted something fun. And I know this sounds crazy, but last March, at the height of the pandemic in the United States, the unpleasantness, I said, I want to do something fun for me. Yeah. And I wanted to write a fantasy because I hadn't done one in a while. I'm like, I spent a lot of time in Sybil's district. It's very gritty. It's very cyberpunk. It's very high tech, low life. So I wanted to do something that wasn't that, but something that was kind of fluffy and fun. And my husband's like, the first book is called Kill Three Birds. Babe, that's not fluffy and fun. It's about a serial killer. I know, but
different than this.
So because I was doing fantasy and I was doing fantastic creatures that haven't really been done before, birds, I needed to make sure that I had a structure. So I opened my OneNote, and then I started adding things about the magic system, about the bird clans and hierarchy, how the order was run, how the Kingdom of Avis operates, because it's a new world. So I had all this new world building to do.
Right. Which is super fun. Super fun.
And I like puns because I'm an English teacher by training. So I did a whole bunch of punny stuff. And so I needed to write this. So it became, I need to plot it. So that it all made sense. And so, that's when I started thinking, maybe I should start all my novels in series this way, and short stories this way, just so I have an idea of like, and they still like in Kill Three Birds and in A Theft Most Foul, all the puns. Prentice still runs the show. There's still many. I didn't know who did anything in A Theft Most Foul until right up to the end. I'm like, oh. So that's our bad person. Okay.
Even within the framework, you were still pantsing.
Yeah. I just knew that this needed to happen, that needed to happen. I knew up front, like some of the interconnectedness pieces, but there were 3 possible suspects still. And then I was like, oh, well, there you are. You're the bad person. Okay.
That to me is one of the absolute joys of pantsing, though, is your subconscious has laid all these trails.
Yes.
And you get to the point where you're doing a reveal and you're like, oh, how cool is that? And so it's as entertaining to write it as it is, hopefully.
No, it is.
And people are like, well, you teach this class on plotting and you talk about plotting. And I'm like, yeah, because sometimes you have to.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to have a roadmap to where you're going. That doesn't mean I don't take a detour to see the giant ball of string. It means that I have a map and I know that I'm going from Washington to St. Louis and I know where I'm going. But that doesn't mean I don't take detours.
When I have a word limit, like I do for people like, hey, will you submit a short story to this anthology?
Right.
And you have this many words, that's when I plan the most. Because I don't have room to wiggle. I don't have very much. So it has to be very, very tight. Not that I'm fluffy in my novellas or novels, but I have more room to like, smell roses, see plants, eat
well,
food.
and explore people's characteristics and a little more 3-dimensionality.
Yeah.
You don't quite have that much in a novella length something, or especially a short. But
a short, yeah.
And you actually really fabulous at writing short, and not something I'm very good at. But you have a lot of anthology credits to your name.
Yeah.
So what led you to that? Just exploring great ideas, or you get asked a lot, or?
I get asked a lot now. I didn't used to. I started. It's actually a leftover from my Writer's Digest days of sending out short stories to people. When I went online in 1998, I didn't stop. Like there are websites that, hey, we actually published. It was Mocha Memoirs, e-zine of short fiction and poetry. We did that from 2001 to 2005. Because I adopted my boys in 2006. So we're like, okay, 3 kids, no longer running a magazine. So we published short fiction. I was very interested in short fiction. I read a lot of short fiction. I wrote a lot of short fiction. And for a long time, I didn't even think I could write a novel because I think Brown Canada is only like 50,000 words. So I didn't even think, and even Sybil's short, she's only like 75. So I'm not a huge like Chihuahua killer writer novelist. That's not me. So I tend to write short anyway.
Yeah.
So, and I read short. So I like to read shorts, mainly because there's a beginning, and middle, and end, and it's succinct, and the writing tends to be tighter.
Right. Right. Well, as you said, you plan more because you don't have as much wiggle room. So yeah, the writing ends up being tighter. You do kill your darlings then.
I have to, and I'm mad sometimes. I'm just like glad no one's watching my face because I'm just like,
I want to cut this part.
I will resurrect you in another story. I promise. I will not forget you.
Well, that actually brings me. Your mention of it brings me to. What made you start Mocha Memoirs Press? Because you've been running it since almost the beginning of your career in writing. And what made you decide, okay, I'm going to submit to these other places, but I also want to be in the driver's seat here? How did that come about?
So right around 2006, I was frustrated with science fiction and fantasy. So I quit. I did. I stopped writing it. And I said, I'm going to write romance for a while and just see how it goes. I'm just gonna write this romance story because I was done with the genre, could not get published. People were like, I had editors tell me I can't identify with this character, and I'm like, you can identify with a shape-shifting tiger, but you can't identify with a Black female protagonist. I'm done. And so I went and I wrote romance for 5 years. Okay, I wrote 60 titles.
Oh wow!
And not by myself. Some of them were solo, but some of them were also with my writing partner at the time. So at the time, Alora's Cave and a whole bunch of other similar small presses were like just pumping out books, and we were just writing them.
Had a huge market and a huge audience, mostly because, as you had pointed out earlier, it was the rise of the ebook, and everybody was going, give me more.
Yeah, and so I did. I wrote that for about 5 or 6 years, to the tune of 60 titles, as I mentioned. And one of the things I actually went through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 publishers at the time, and I learned a lot about small press publishing, specifically electronic press publishing. And so
I bet you learned a lot of the what not to do.
Yes, and I also met and had an opportunity to network with a lot of cover artists, with a lot of editors. Those that I thought were great, and those I'm just like, you should never work for anyone, like ever. So what I did was, and when I went back, I was like, okay, I'm ready to go back to science fiction fantasy. I absolutely cannot write about A, B, and C parts anymore. And it had become that. Like, it didn't start out as
tab
that,
A and slot B is what we
when 2 of my publishers were like, you need to cut the first 10,000 words of this, and you need to have a sex scene every other chapter, I'm like, I'm done. Yeah, because that's just not storytelling to me. That's not what I signed up for.
That's production line churn.
And I just, and it paid well. It paid really well. I kind of miss the money sometimes, but I'm like, I can't write these types of stories that you want. Because there was a story that I loved, and they cut the first 10,000 words, and I was like, and I'm done. And so I started writing science fiction and fantasy again. But again, in the 6 years, nothing had changed. Yeah. And so I was like, I can't be the only one, the only person of color, the only Black woman that wasn't Octavia Butler or Nettie or N.K. Jemisin, who was finding a hard time. It's like, we got 3. We don't really need any more, Nicole. And I'm like, ugh.
And
you know, a hard time getting in.
The thing that makes me so crazy about that too is, look at the numbers. If people are buying their books, they're gonna want more. Yeah. Even if they're completely crazy, misogynistic, racist, whatever. Look at the damn numbers.
I'm just going to start my own publishing company. And I had gotten my rights back to Silence and those books. And I had gotten my rights back from Crystal Dreams for the Soul Cages. And so I'd gotten my works back, and I'm like, they're just hanging out. And I'm like, you know,
if I'm going to self-publish them anyway,
I can do this. And I can do it for others. So it wasn't just me. it was also, I can do it for others, because I can't be the only one struggling like this. And I wasn't.
No,
and so that's what we do. Our mission has always been to amplify marginalized voices in speculative fiction. And that's what I've been doing for 11 years now.
Yeah. To great success. And you have some marvelous, marvelous product. You have some marvelous authors.
I do.
Tell us a little bit about some of the various topics, because you've picked some really cool topics for various anthologies. And one of the things I want to point out is that anthologies are a really great way, in case you're one of our listeners out there, to find new writers, to find people whose stories you love. And if you like a particular topic, like the Wild West, or, Slay, which is one of my favorites, you can find new writers there whose voices you might not have picked up otherwise. And I love that. I just love that. So tell me why some of the different topics and pieces that you picked for anthologies.
Oh, I wish I picked them. I don't. So like the Sherlock Holmes anthologies were completely the brainchild of Alexandra Christian. I cannot take credit for that. She's a huge Sherlock Holmes fan. Yes, and she was like, and I remember the day she IM'd me and said, "Hey, did you know that Sherlock is in the public domain?" I have an idea. And I was like, okay. And,
I have a cunning plan.
And she was like, it's like she was counting down to the day where it is in the public domain. And I was like, sure, we could take Sherlock and give him real paranormal mysteries to solve, no problem. And she took it and she ran with it. I just funded the stuff. In terms of like, we just did the cover and the editing, but she didn't pay people, but she's the one who's like, I want to do this idea.
Right.
And the same thing happened with Reed Sheridan Rose. Now, Reed Sheridan Rose and I go back to the e-zine of short fiction and poetry, because she was my editor then. So I've known Reed for like 25 years. And so she was like, I've got this idea. I want to do an anthology of steampunk pirates, so a vast airships was born. I'm like, okay, that's fine with me. And so, but Slay is mine. That one was in mine wholeheartly. And it came about because myself and another author, Kai Leaks, we're always talking about how much we miss Ellie Banks, right? That we love her Vampire Huntress series, that we missed that. And so we decided
I miss her too.
Yeah, she was phenomenal. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I get mad.
She could set a scene and put you right in it.
And you can feel like the vibrations of people breathing, right? It's brilliant stuff.
Yeah. And I have gone back and read some of her things just to figure out, how did she do that? Because I remember, those scenes, you have that scene so vividly in your mind. And I've gone back and read and going, how did she create that?
How did she do that? I know.
Yeah.
So I decided that I was like, I wonder if anyone would be interested in just Black vampire or Black huntress, right?
Sure.
Or Slayer's stories in an anthology. And I had already bought the cover art for Slay. I bought it from Tara Reid. And I didn't know what I was going to do with it. I just saw the cover art. It was pre-made. I was like, I love this. And I just bought it. I have a small cover art buying problem. I actually have like 10 covers now that don't have stories. I just buy them because they're beautiful. I am not an addict. I can stop whenever they stop making great covers.
Exactly.
So and so I could reach out to my people I wanted to kind of like see if they were interested in writing stories for it, my anchor authors. I'm like, hey, would you be interested? And I got them, and they were all very excited. And so the momentum kind of built around that. They were excited, so I got more excited. And Slay was, and I didn't even come up with the title. I had asked Tara, the cover artist. I was like, I need a title for this. And she was like, why don't you just call it Slay? And I was like,
that's awesome.
You were awesome. And she's like, I already got, and of course she did the title and the formatting for the book, right? Because it's her cover art. And it just took off from there. And it was brilliant. I added like Stories of the Vampire Noir. That was mine, but the primary title came from Tara. So
and that cover art, y'all, if you haven't seen it, if nothing else, just go look at it for the absolutely beautiful cover and the movement in the cover, and it just grips you. It's one of those things that even in the thumbnail size on on any of the sites, you see it and you go, wait, I have to see what this is.
It's brilliant. It is a show-stopping cover. I was at a Comic Con in Charlotte, and a woman was walking by, and she actually stopped and came back. She didn't even buy Slay, but Slay snagged her attention. She ended up getting something else. But she looked at that because she's like, I stopped because I saw that cover.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. Well,
I aspire to that kind of cover.
Yes, it was brilliant. It actually snagged the customer. She was like, oh, what's that? And she came right back around. So it was pretty awesome. It's a really great cover. They're really great stories.
Remind me who is in it, because I don't have it pulled up on my other computer.
No, you're fine. Craig Giddy is in it. Cherie Renee Thomas is in it. Elle Marie Wood is in it. Kai Leaks is in it. Jessica Cage is in it. Samantha Bryant is in it. So you guys may have seen her a lot on ConTinual. Yes. She's also in it. Bonnie Winslow Christ is in it. There's like a ton of people.
Yeah.
Stephen Ben Patton is in it. Steve Sampson is in it. It's just a huge. Samiko Salson is in it. Just a lovely collection of stories. Yeah. And they're all different.
They're very different. I mean, obviously you have the theme, but they're very different. But I've found some new authors from it. It's great because sometimes you hesitate to buy a book because you're like, don't know if I really am going to like their voice. Or really like it. And again, that's one of the things I love about anthologies is that you can, if there's even one author you love, buy it, and then you get to figure out if you'd like some wonderful other new authors too.
Oh God, Milton Davis is in it. Marcia Colette is in it. There's like a ton of people that are, and some new writers are in it as well. So it's one of the things I like about Slay is that the story, there's 22 stories in it. It's a big volume. It's like 400 plus pages.
Yes,
it's a big volume of stories. It also has artwork, amazing artwork in it by Ben Merbilli, who's a Charlotte artist. Which is for our Kickstarter, we offered to write obituaries for people and have them and have that was one of the perks, and have them illustrated. And so there are a couple of those dispersed throughout Slay. So you get some nice artwork too.
That's awesome. One of the things that I thought too that was great about that is that there's so few covers that show women in positions of power. I mean, especially in, like, you think about the old science fiction and fantasy covers, about the time you and I both went, done. And it's always, the guy with the muscly guy with the sword and the woman going, or she's in chains or something like that.
Yes.
One of the things I love about covers like Slay, covers like some of the steampunk ones you've done, they are really women in positions of power. They are taking care of themselves.
Yeah.
And we so often do anyway. So it's kind of nice to get the recognition on the cover.
So we are pretty prickly about things like that. We are, if you look at the About Us page, it's all women. Except for Wes, who's our web guy. He's the only guy in the bunch, and everyone else is a woman or identifies as non-binary.
Right.
So that's not. I mean, so we're very inclusive in that manner. We also like to catch each other. Like, wait, that's a little misogynistic. We're kind of not gonna go with that. And we call those out in editing because we do publish men. Let's say that we don't publish men. We do. But we do call it out in the editing and say, hey, we don't really like this. This is not who we are. It doesn't kind of represent who we are. But if it's true to the character, we'll leave it. Like, the character is a misogynist, it stays because he's a misogynist. Yeah. But we try to, like, kind of tamp down on the exposition if it shows up.
Right.
And sometimes they don't know. So we do a lot of, hey, did you know this can be read as offensive? We recommend, or how about rephrase it to like this. So we try to do that in our work just to be, our proofreaders and our editors. That's what we do. Which
I think is absolutely great because, if the last couple of years has pointed up nothing else, it's that so much of this is like wallpaper. You don't even know you have it there until you write it down to somebody who goes, did you realize that was really offensive?
Right. And you may not know, right?
And you may not know.
Which is why we're such a diverse group. And that's not to say that we catch everything, but we do try, and we do put our efforts toward that. That's just what we do. And we look when stuff comes in us, and we still get a lot of subs that have nothing to do with what we publish. I feel like that's what all like read the guidelines just doesn't always sink in. So we were closed for submissions for like 8 months, and we still got submissions. Like we got like 20 a month, and I'm like, that's what I do. It's not bad, but it's like we're closed. It literally says we're closed to submissions.
Yeah.
So you're not even checking the submission page, or you're
just sending it to everybody you can. You know, even back in our beginning days when you had your Writer's Digest in Europe, you know, waiting for the new edition to come out so you can send it to the new publisher when the new editor in chief, because they're new. And then you got to cross check to make sure that you didn't send it to them somewhere else and they rejected you. You know, even in those days, there were people who literally would just blanket the universe with it. And I talked to an editor one time who said that they kept a list. If they got like 5 submissions or 6 submissions from somebody that just didn't fit anything they did, they would say, if it comes in, send it right back out.
Yep. I have a person who sent me an original submission when we were open, and it literally said, your guidelines don't fit my needs. Here are the 28 submissions that I have. And he included every single Word doc of what he wanted published. And I replied to him declining. We're not interested in publishing this. Thank you. Best of luck in finding a home for it.
Right.
He sent it in. He sends it in every 2 months.
The whole catalog.
Yep. Repeatedly.
Oh my word.
I just delete it now. I've already rejected it once. So, but I'm just like, really, dude? I've already said no to this. And it's rude to assume it's actually like it's super hubris, right? To think that that we don't have anything else to publish except for your 28 novellas.
Yeah. And that we have so much time on our hands that we can read your 28 novellas.
We're not a pay as you go publisher. So
so what is next for you personally in the writing world, and what is next for Mocha Memoirs Press?
So for the press, and next month we have is our big release month, because we have 2 things coming out. We have Bonnie Winslow's Chris Dragon Reign short story collection of dragon stories. I am so excited. They are so good. That's coming out September 15th. And we also September is 1. October, we have 2 things coming out. We have the final chapter in Todd Sullivan's Windshine Chronicles. That's their Korean horror / fantasy series. The last installment is called Lord, it just went out of my brain. Brew. I forgot. Brew. I can't think of it.
We were talking on one of the other panels that Japanese and Korean horror are horror, true horror.
Seriously, I love Kingdom, and that's a lot of what Blood Stew is the title for the last installment of the Windshine Chronicles. But the whole Chronicles reads a lot like Kingdom. It's historic Korea. There's zombies or hollow men in the first one. There's things to fight and battle in every installment. And it's medieval swords in terms of like Korea. So it's very Todd has lived in Korea and China in Japan for the last like 10 years. So
wow.
Yeah, he's still there now, awesome. Right? Yeah. So that's coming out in October, as well as Fantastic Fittings, which is our steampunk novella for C.M. Reese that's coming out as well. So super excited because we didn't have a lot of fantasy, and now we have a lot more fantasy titles coming. So I'm like, yes. We were top heavy on horror. Can't imagine why. Not like I love horror or anything. So I was like, we don't have enough fantasy titles. So these 3 titles, Dragon Reign, Blood Stew, and Fantastic Fittings, are kind of like our beefing up of our fantasy, and that will we won't publish anything new in November and December just because those tend to be holiday heavy months.
Right.
So
And everybody wants to go read the light, fluffy holiday offerings, and that's great. That's totally great.
That's totally fine.
Come back to us in January and February. We'll get your blood moving.
we always do something big for Women in Horror Month, which is February, March. And so that we'll release L. Marie Wood's new title.
Is that the second one in the Realms, or is it
not that one? I'm not the publisher for the Realms. I wish I was, but I'm not.
Talk about a spine chiller.
Yes. Oh my God. But her telecommuting novella for us was also very.
Yes, I bought that, and I was like, okay, not reading this before bed.
Yeah,
whatever you do when you buy it, don't read it before bed.
No. It's like one of my favorite things we've published this year, is telecommuting.
Yeah. She's a very good writer.
Oh, she's an award-winning screenwriter.
I know.
So she raised that tight dialogue and writing into her own. Her slave story was called The Dance, and it just knocked me off. It was so vivid and beautiful and strangely erotic and horror filled. It was just a brilliant story. I really loved it.
She's a great writer. She really is.
No. So, and as for me personally as a writer, I am working on my Fawn and Briscoe series, which for my patrons, they get a new installment in that series every month. So that's coming to a close, and at the end of this year, that series will be over. So now I'll start writing a new series just for my patrons. So I'm working on that. I'm also writing outlining the next Kingdom of Avis series.
Ooh, cool.
Sorry. Of course, its title will be a punny title.
Have you come up with it yet? Not.
I have 3, but I won't reveal which one it will be.
Okay.
I have a list of punny titles, and whichever one doesn't get the biggest groan from my husband, I'll take that.
A good barometer.
Oh my gosh, yeah. So I try to do something different for each of them. Like the first one is a serial killer one, right? And the second one is a theft most foul, and it's my attempt at a Dan Brown artifact stealing story, right?
Cool.
So there's an artifact that goes missing from the Goddesses Museum that's located at a university, and so it's definitely heavily influenced by Dan Brown's, Angels and Demons. You see his protagonist running all over the place trying to find the artifact and resolve the issue. That's what happens in A Theft Most Foul. So the third one, though, won't deal with that. It'll deal with something else that I'm really leaning toward, and not to give too much away, but it involves a kidnapping. And so there's a lot of people have been asking, because for some reason this is a really popular series. People have been asking to learn more about not just Avis, but they want to know more about the religion of the goddess that's followed. And you get a lot more of that in A Theft Most Foul, but in the next installment, Prentice will go home, right? And that gives you a lot of insight into how hawks are trained, the division between what happened to the male hawks, right? And all these other other things that happen. So that's and you'll get it. She goes back to Lanham, which is the city where it's like the Vatican for Avis. So she'll go back there, and you'll get to see some of those political inner workings as well that are actually functioning or kind of not functioning in Avis. And
or so functioning only to serve those who are in the hierarchy.
And people should watch as Prentice as a character goes from being, I'm just doing my job in gold and believing very much in the work that she does, to having questions. Not a lot, just some little questions that don't quite fit in A Theft Most Foul, to watching who she becomes in that third installment when she goes back to Lanham.
Cool. Well, when should we look for that?
That'll be January. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it'll be a year to the day probably the A Theft Most Foul was released. So yeah, it'll be January.
Oh, great. We will look for that. Absolutely. So now that we're sort of close to time, so we'll wrap up, but I want to give you an opportunity to say anything else you might like to say about your work, or any questions I did not ask that you would like me to ask, just say. And also tell us where we can find you.
Right. So I encourage everyone to buy directly from Mocha Memoirs Press versus Amazon or Barnes & Noble, so many other places. That definitely gives Mocha Memoirs a larger chunk of the profits and the proceeds, which means our authors get a larger chunk of the profit and the proceeds. So if you can buy direct from us, please do. And don't be afraid to try what we have.
Yeah.
A lot of people are scared to
I'll
try
second that
press
one.
titles. Don't be afraid to try it. Just read the back, jump in, give it a try. And then
you will find, I will second that and say, you will find some fabulous authors.
Yeah, and we do have really great authors. But you can find us at mochamemoirspress.com. You can find me there as well. You can also find me at NicoleGibbonsKurtz.net. We are on Instagram at Mocha Memoirs Press, on Twitter at Mocha Memoirs, and you can find me in all of those places as well. We're on Facebook at Mocha Memoirs Press, just / Mocha Memoirs Press, and they'll take you to our fan page. And of course, you can find us at ConTinual.
Yes, absolutely. We have always enjoyed having you on panels.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's been wonderful to spend an hour with Nicole Gibbons Kurtz. I hope you'll join us again here on ConTinual.